Hey everyone, welcome back. It's the beginning of March, and that means we have another monthly book wrap up to go over. We're going to be going over all 13 books that I read in February. Picking up where I left off at the end of January is a baseball romance series called The Boston Blues by Molly Goines. The first book was Picture Us, and that one I finished at the end of January. So the first book that I read in the month of February was the second book, which is Coach Me, and this one I rated 4 stars. This book had a single dad, nanny, 12 years age gap, and brother's coach. I really enjoyed this book. It's your classic single daddy nanny, and adding in the extra detail of the female main character's brother, that's his coach, and she starts to fall for him and all that fun stuff. So, loved that book. The second book that I read in the month of February is the last book of the series, which is Stealing You, also by Molly Goines, obviously. And this one had way more emotion in it and just really was a great book to wrap up the series. This one had roommates, friends with benefits, and secret crushes, and a lot of banter. The male main character has a tough and goofball outside exterior, but inside he's really emotional and a big cuddly bear, which we all love. This one had way more emotion in it because the male main character, his mom has Alzheimer's, and there's a lot of emotion with that. And obviously with them being roommates, they start to fall for each other and then become friends with benefits, and they get closer, both kind of open up to each other, and it's just a very feel-good story with obviously some romance and spice in it, but a great way to end a series. The next book that I read is the 5th book of the Big Shot series by Tessa Bailey, Catch Her If You Can. And this one I rated 3.5 stars. This book has marriage at convenience, childhood friends to lovers. They've secretly pined and loved each other for a long time, and he's down bad. This one had third act drama, but not quite a third act breakup. What I really liked about this book was the relationship that the female main character and the male main character had when they first met, and like how it kind of evolved over the years as friends, and kind of like how as they both grew up they kind of held that love for each other and kind of knew that the other person was it for them. So this is a book where the female main character like waits for him, if you know what I mean. Wildcard by Stephanie Archer is the 5th book of her Vancouver Storm series, and the next book that I read in February. This book I rated 4 stars. It's an age gap, single dad, and golden retriever black cat, and forced proximity, and boss's daughter. This book was another single dad book that I absolutely devoured. The male main character is the coach of this hockey team, and his boss is bringing on his daughter, who wanted nothing to do with hockey, to try to like have her take over the team, and they're forced to work with each other, but they've always kind of like had this banter relationship. Obviously now that they have to work together, they spend more time together, and full circle, they fall in love eventually, obviously. The next book that I read is The Marriage Bet by Olivia Hale. This is the 2nd book in the Billionaire Games series. This one I rated 4 stars. This one has marriage at convenience, enemies to lovers, slow burn, and forced proximity. This book is also the epitome of the saying that there's a thin line between love and hate. The female main character's family business is in trouble, and she wants to keep it afloat, and in order to do that she has to turn to her enemy, and they get a marriage of convenience, and he is willing to take it to get revenge on her uncle who is destroying her family business. They end up having to spend a lot of time together faking their relationship, and then eventually they run into trouble when their fake relationship is exposed, but at that point their relationship is real, and they prove to each other that it is real through acts of service and big grand gestures and all that stuff. This book is also a very slow burn story, so you have to be patient, but the anticipation and the tension between the two really make up for it. The next book is, I think, either my first 5-star of the year or something very close to that, but it is Endgame by Riley Page, and this is the 4th book in the PCU Storm series. This book had me so emotional. I literally was crying like basically the entire book. At one point I think like maybe in the first like half or first quarter of the book, I didn't know if I could continue to read it because of like how like emotional and how like just tear-jerking it was, but I pushed through. I had to read it. It was just incredibly written, and you really get to feel what the characters are feeling and what they're going through, and it was just incredible. I really can't talk much about this book without spoiling anything, but definitely read it. Just, I would say like 70% a story and 30% the romance and the sports part. So kind of like a weird ratio and an interesting like storyline, I guess, in other words, but just really well written and very just emotional and good stories. The next books that I read are part of a series. It's a 5-book series, the Blade King series by Ruth Stilling. The first book is The Perfect Deek, and this one I rated 3.5 stars. It's a fake dating, roommates, a lot of pining, he fell first and harder, and ex-boyfriend's teammates. In this story, they're both pro athletes and they've known each other since college, and he has always kind of been rivals with this teammate of his who is now the ex-boyfriend of the female main character. And the male main character is new to the team that his rival's on, and the female main character, now that she's broken up with her now ex-boyfriend, needs a place to stay, and she's known this guy since college, kind of like acquaintances vibes. They end up moving in with each other. They get to know each other more. She learns that he's had a thing for her since they first met in college, and always kind of stuck up for her and didn't think that her ex-boyfriend was good enough for her. And yeah, there's drama with the whole like teammate and ex-boyfriend situation, but it all works out in the end. The next book in the series is Total Shutdown. This one I also rated 3.5 stars. This one has a 9-year age gap, single dad, kind of one-night stand-ish, and he fell first and harder. In this book, she is looking for no strings attached, no relationships at all. She's also like a baddie, and he is obviously a single dad and still kind of reeling in the aftermath of what happened to his ex-wife or late wife, and really kind of just his main focus is on his kid, and his world literally turns upside down when she comes into his life. And yeah, it's just like she's a baddie, turns his world upside down, and that's exactly what he needs. And they fall in love. She's great to his kid, which makes it even harder for him to resist her and all that fun stuff. The third book in the series is Shots Fired, and this one I rated 4 stars. This book is reformed playboy, teammate's sister, accidental pregnancy, and he fell first and harder. The accidental pregnancy trope isn't my favorite, but the way that the story was written, like they were starting to fall for each other already and weren't really tied together because of the pregnancy. It was just like an added bonus for them. This book also had some drama in it because of the whole teammate sister vibe. The male main character, again, the reformed playboy trope, he was a playboy and kind of like a bad guy-ish in a way and had a reputation, and that all changed when he met his teammate's sister, who was very much off limits, and she was looking for fun since she moved from the UK to the States, and their chemistry was off the charts, and they decided to hook up in secret, and eventually one thing led to another, and they obviously got closer together but had to hide the relationship and had to eventually face the music. But very good story as well. The fourth book in the series is Full Tilt. This one I also rated 4 stars. This one's a little different. It is reformed playgirl and enemies to lovers, and his life turned him hard, but he changes back to his true self and big softy after meeting her. What I really loved about this book was the individual character development and arc for the male main character. It was just like his history, the backstory, his childhood, and what kind of brought him to where he's at now, and then how that all changes after meeting her, and kind of like the struggles that he goes through, kind of figuring out who he wants to be and who he thinks he should be. You don't see reformed playgirl in a lot of stories, and I wouldn't really classify her as a playgirl. She is just looking for love and is trying to find it by testing out a lot of guys, and the chemistry with this bad guy from the team that her friends are linked to and everything is someone she doesn't want to touch because he's rude and mean. But again, like, their chemistry is off the charts, so eventually they both give in after some banter and teasing and a lot of flirting. The last book of the series is Within Range, and this one unfortunately was my least favorite book of the series. I rated it 3 stars still because it still had like a good story, but the trope itself, like, overall was not my favorite. It is a 14-year age gap. He is older, she's a single mom, and what the twist is and what my least favorite part was that it's the male main character, his love interest is his best friend's daughter. I'll just let that sink in for a little bit. So, you know, I don't mind the age gap, but the best friend's daughter, just something didn't really sit right with me. But moving past that, if you get past the fact that it's his best friend's daughter and she grew up with him as kind of like a uncle figure, if you kind of get past that aspect, you move on to the part where she's a single mom, and her ex-boyfriend was, you know, a bad guy, and she wants nothing to do with him, and she moved back home to New York, is looking for help, and as a good friend, the male main character helps her, and because of certain situations that end up happening, even though he wants to stay away from her because he knows he has a crush on her, he's forced to still help her. And then the more time they spend together, their chemistry becomes more obvious. And then they eventually get into a relationship, and someone has to break the news to her dad / his best friend. So that one was an interesting story. I will say what I really like about it is the fact that he is so willing to step up to the plate and be protective of her and her kid, especially since they're young and she's a single mom. And I just like that he's like really protective. So yeah, I don't know how I feel about that last one, but if you read the last one and have any thoughts about it, let me know in the comments. I'd be intrigued to see your thoughts on it. The second to last book that I read in the month of February is Just for the Cameras by Megan Quinn. This is the first book of her new series, Bay Area Players. In this book, I rated 4 stars, and kind of thinking back to it, I'll probably give it like closer to like a 4.5 stars. This book had grumpy sunshine, forced proximity, fake dating, enemies to lovers. He is tough on the outside, but actually like a big softie on the inside. This book was super cute, and I went into it not really knowing the premise of the book, which was amazing because I was pleasantly surprised, and it was just super fun. There were definitely funny parts, but also really meaningful and emotional parts. And then obviously their romance aspect lived up to the hype. So I'm gonna just go a little bit over the summary that I wrote for this book because I just think everyone needs to know. So if you don't want to know the summary and want to go into this book blind, skip ahead. So Graydon, the male main character, is a pro football player, and him and a couple other pro athletes in this California Bay Area are forced to do like volunteer work to help their respective teams' images look good. And so they are assigned to volunteer at the zoo. he is assigned to work with the flamingos, and he is not happy about it because he has other things to worry about, aka his mom, which is so sweet and the emotional part of the story. Anyways, obviously he doesn't want to be there. And to make things worse, the zookeeper he's assigned to with the flamingos is upbeat, sunshiny, super cute, and he doesn't need another distraction or anything outside of football and his mom. Maple, the zookeeper of the flamingos, is desperate for this to work out with the pro athletes because she needs the money and the donations and the visibility that he brings to help bring in money to help the flamingos. And she's willing to do anything to get this partnership to work. At first, they're obviously clashing and are enemies and don't get along because he doesn't want to be there, but she wants him there. Eventually, they come to an agreement where he will help at the zoo if she trains like a football player, and that's how they kind of get their fake dating to start, because people believe that their new joint Instagram account is a hard launch of their relationship. So they play into that to keep engagement of the public, and eventually the more time they spend together, obviously they start to learn more about each other and fall in love. It's really sweet because obviously he's like really kind of broody and mean, but she kind of realizes why he's like that and brings him out of that shell, and yeah, now he's a softie and she loves him. And finally, the last book that I read, literally the last day of February, was Please Don't Go by E. Salvador, the first book in the Midnight Strike series. This one, I rated a solid 5 stars. I was not hesitant about giving it 5 stars. This book has been getting a ton of attention online, and after reading it, it was for a good reason. This book was a little bit of Golden Retriever, Black Cat, Reverse Grumpy Sunshine, and kind of shared trauma, or they both had trauma, which you really need to read the trigger warnings in the beginning, because the whole book, like the entire book, deals with a very, very heavy topic that obviously some people may be sensitive to. So definitely read the trigger warnings. It starts out like literally page 1. This was another book that I went into not really knowing the plot line that well. It is a little bit of a sports romance. Again, I don't feel like the sports part of it was like super major, but it does play a part when it comes to like mental health. Yeah, it's a crazy book, and the way they, you know, connect and I guess bond and form their relationship is a very like deep and heavy and crazy way. For the majority of the book, it's him supporting her and being there for her, and then third act drama, I guess, and maybe like a little bit of a third act breakup. I don't know if I would call it a third act breakup, but just that turning point was like definitely like a plot twist. You got hints of it throughout the book, but it was just like crazy, emotional, definitely cried during like the end of it. But eventually, of course, they got their happily ever after, and just the way that the heavy topics of mental health and all that stuff was told and dealt with in the story was very well done. And you kind of got hints of the other characters in the book, which will be the other characters in the rest of the series. So I think this whole series is gonna kind of revolve around relationships formed around mental health, which I think is very cool, and something that not a lot of books kind of and stories revolve around, if that makes sense. There was romance and a love story involved in it, but I think for people who want more than just spicy and happy romance, this type of story will give you like a storyline, character development, and all of the good stuff. So that brings us to the end of my February reads. Hopefully you found some of these reviews interesting, or you found a book that piqued your interest and want to read. I'm so excited that it's March now, the sun's coming out, spring's coming, and warm weather's coming, and a ton of new books are coming out this March, so I'm super excited, and I can't wait to do my March recap. I'll see you guys in the next video.